It appears for the first time in decades, the U.S. Senate is poised to pass new gun safety legislation by the end of this week. There are more than the 10 Republican votes needed to break the 60-vote filibuster, including Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. As expected, the National Rifle Association quickly put out a statement opposing the legislation. Here's Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut to explain the legislation that now has bipartisan support.
First, let me talk about the provisions in this bill that change our nation's firearms laws. First, we are going to invest in the development of crisis intervention orders. We are going to give money out to states that they will be able to use to implement what are commonly called red flag laws. These are laws that allow local authorities and courts to take weapons, firearms, temporarily away from individuals who are threatening to hurt themselves or others. We just saw Connecticut's red flag law be used just in the last month or so to take weapons away from a young man who was making threats to shoot up schools, potentially saving dozens of lives. Under this bill, every state will be able to use significant new federal dollars to be able to expand their programs that try to stop dangerous people contemplating mass murder or suicide from being able to have access to the weapons that allow them to perpetrate that crime. And as Senator Cornyn said, we will also make those dollars eligible for a narrow range of other court-based anti-violence interventions, something that was very important to our Republican colleagues. Second, this bill is going to make sure that no domestic abuser can purchase or own a gun. We are closing the boyfriend's loophole. And what we know is that in states that have taken this step already, there are 10% fewer intimate partner deaths. This is an incredibly important step forward. We know this provision alone is going to save the lives of so many women who unfortunately die at the hands of a boyfriend or an ex-boyfriend who hunts them down with a firearm. To be consistent with state felony restoration rights, this legislation will allow individuals to be able to get their rights back after a period of time, but only for first-time offenders and only if there are no crimes of violence in the intervening time. This bill will provide for enhanced background checks for younger buyers. What we know is that the profile of the modern mass shooter is often in the 18 to 21-year-old range. And so this bill has enhanced background checks for those individuals, including a call to the local police department, a process that can take up to 3 days, up to 10 days if there are particular signs of concern that investigators need to perform follow-up on. That enhanced background check is going to make sure that younger buyers who are in crisis have another check performed, perhaps a short period of time in between their decision to buy a lethal weapon to perform a crime and their ability to get that weapon. This bill has new criminal statutes banning gun trafficking and straw purchasing. This is incredibly important for our cities. We have a flow of illegal guns that come into these cities, and yet, for decades, for some reason, Congress has not given our federal authorities the ability to interrupt these gun running rings because we have no effective ban at a federal level on trafficking and straw purchasing. We will after we pass this law. And finally, we clarify under this bill who needs to register as a federally licensed gun dealer. One of the individuals who sold a weapon to a mass shooter in Odessa, Texas, should have been licensed as a federal dealer, but he wasn't, and he sold the gun to a person who was prohibited from buying the gun because of his mental health history without a background check. We will clarify in this law that individuals like that need to register as federal firearms dealers and they need to perform background checks. And as Senator Cornyn said, this bill makes a historic investment in mental health. A historic investment in mental health. Thanks to Debbie Stabenow and Roy Blunt, we are going to be able to expand out the Certified Community Health Center model nationally. That literally means millions of people in this country in underserved areas who have no access to mental health are going to be able to get it after we pass this bill. We have significant new funding in this bill for school-based health centers to make sure that kids are better served, especially those kids who are in crisis. We have help in this bill for pediatricians who are trying to do telehealth consults with behavioral health professionals or trying to get more training on mental health so that they can help their patients. And finally, we make investments in school and community safety. Funds to help schools make their campuses safer places, but also funds for community-based programs that are doing good work in cities from Boston to Hartford to Dallas, interrupting cycles of violence in our communities. For 30 years, Mr. President, murder after murder, suicide after suicide, mass shooting after mass shooting, Congress did nothing. This week, we have a chance to break this 30-year period of silence with a bill that changes our laws in a way that will save thousands of lives. It is a compromise. It is a bipartisan compromise. It is a path forward to the way that both Republicans and Democrats can work together to address some of the most vexing, most difficult challenges this nation faces.